It was supposed to be a beautiful anniversary dinner, one that I had planned for months. I had made reservations at an upscale restaurant, one we had talked about visiting for ages. But Randy, my boyfriend of 3 years, was late. Not just a little late, but 2 hours late. I checked my phone nervously, sending him message after message, all unanswered. The waitress gave me pitying looks, asking if I needed anything. I just kept saying, he's on his way, just running late. Finally, when he showed up, it wasn't just him. He brought 4 friends. And then he did it. He turned to his group and loudly announced, "See? Told you she'd still be here, like a pathetic puppy." They all laughed. I froze. My heart sank. He had just humiliated me in front of a restaurant full of people. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. This was something else entirely. The morning after the humiliating dinner, I woke up to 78 missed calls. Most were from Randy, but a few came from numbers I didn't recognize. Something wasn't right. As I listened to his frantic messages, I felt a strange sense of clarity. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't Randy. This time, it was a notification from the bank confirming that his car, the car I had just paid off for him, was being repossessed. I had just made the final payment, and now, in an instant, it was gone. But that wasn't the worst part. Randy's belongings were gone too, all of it dumped in the local landfill. I had decided to finally let go. But what was the true cost of letting go? 3 years ago, Randy had come into my life when my apartment flooded. I had to crash at my brother's house, waiting for the repairs to be finished. Randy was the plumber assigned to fix everything. At the time, I thought it was a stroke of luck. He was cute, charming, and easy to talk to. But now, looking back, I wondered, did he purposely drag out the repairs just to get closer to me? Was this all part of his plan? I tried not to overthink it, but the thought gnawed at me. As the months went by, Randy's job kept slipping through his fingers. He was constantly complaining about his bosses, sending me long, angry voice messages about how incompetent they were, about how they didn't appreciate him. He trashed his parents too, calling them failures. Every time he vented about his situation, I listened. I tried to be understanding, to help him get back on his feet. But now, I saw those rants in a new light. I had saved every message, every complaint. But why? What was I really waiting for? 6 months ago, Randy's beloved 2015 Mustang broke down. He was devastated. This was his dream car, the one thing he had been saving for. Or so I thought. I ended up covering the payments for him, hoping it would help him get back on track. But the payments added up, and I stretched my finances thin. But this was what I believed in, helping him get stable. That's what love was, right? Last night, everything crashed. We had our anniversary dinner, but Randy didn't show up on time. It was a cruel joke to him. He thought it was funny. The friends he brought with him laughed at me, at how pathetic I was for waiting. The pain was unbearable. And then after all the ridicule, he reminded me in front of everyone, this is why she's the best. She waits around like a good girl, pays my bills, and doesn't complain. I smiled, but it was a hollow smile. My soul was cracking, and I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I knew that something had to change. After years of supporting him, paying off his bills, pretending everything was okay, I finally realized that I was the one being taken advantage of. I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. I wasn't going to let him drag me down. When I excused myself to go to the restroom, I made a decision. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to cry. No, I was going to fight back in the most calculated way. It was time for Randy to face the truth. I opened up my phone and scrolled through every saved voice message Randy had ever sent me. The ones where he trashed his boss. The ones where he insulted his parents. The ones where he called me his personal ATM. As I listened to those old messages, something inside me clicked. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone he had hurt. I texted my friend Emma to pick me up. But I wasn't just leaving the restaurant. I had a bigger plan. Randy needed to be exposed, and I knew exactly how to do it. Emma arrived to pick me up. I smiled weakly at her, knowing that the hardest part was yet to come. I had to act fast. Randy had no idea what I was about to do. In the car, I pulled up Randy's work email, his social media accounts, his bank details, everything. I was his digital life. And now, it was time to expose him for who he really was. I sent the voice messages to his boss and his parents. I canceled our shared subscriptions and changed all my passwords. Then I packed up his stuff. I wasn't even folding his clothes. I was done. The next morning, Randy's phone began to explode with calls, but I didn't answer. I wasn't even worried. I had already taken everything from him. His job was hanging by a thread. His car was gone, and now, so was his reputation. And as for his stuff, well, it was all in the local dump. But this was just the beginning. Randy still didn't know the full extent of what I had done. And when he found out, he wouldn't know who to blame but himself. The morning after the destruction of his things, I woke up to an unexpected text. His friend Jake was trying to gaslight me, telling me I had gone too far. But the truth was, I was just getting started. The emails from Randy, the voice clips, the messages, I had them all, and I was ready to share them. This wasn't about revenge. This was about showing the world what kind of person Randy truly was. As I dug deeper into Randy's emails, I discovered a disturbing truth. He had been planning this whole thing for weeks. The humiliation, the jokes, the game, everything had been a setup. The betrayal cut deeper than anything else. But I wasn't surprised anymore. I was determined to make sure everyone knew what he had done. I kept Randy at arm's length, refusing to engage with his manipulative behavior. He was trying to turn everything around, claiming I was the crazy one. But the evidence didn't lie, and I wasn't going to let him rewrite history. Through it all, Randy's life began to fall apart. His friends stopped returning his calls. His car was repossessed, and his lies were exposed. He could no longer hide behind the facade of being the victim. The truth was out there, and there was no going back. I thought I would feel guilty. I thought I would miss him. But as I watched everything he had built crumble, I realized that it was over. There was nothing left for me to feel. I had finally taken control of my life. For the first time in 3 years, I woke up in my own apartment feeling peaceful. The chaos that had consumed my life for so long, the endless late nights, the debt, the emotional toll of being with someone who couldn't care less, was finally gone. Randy's voice no longer echoed in my head, and I no longer had to carry the weight of his failures. But peace didn't come without a cost. I still had the haunting memories of those 2 hours at the restaurant. The way he humiliated me. It wasn't just the words. It was the fact that he had never seen me as anything more than a tool for his own convenience. The man I had trusted for so long had been nothing but a master manipulator. Days passed, and I finally thought the storm had settled. But then, out of nowhere, I received a text from Randy. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name flash across my screen. His message was simple. We need to talk. This isn't over. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of curiosity and dread. What more could he possibly have to say? After everything that had happened, he was still trying to play the victim. I knew I had to make a choice. Either face him and end this once and for all, or ignore him and continue on with my life. I chose the latter. I blocked his number without responding. I wasn't going to let him back into my life. Not after everything he had put me through. The next few days were eerily quiet. I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't experienced in years. But that silence was short-lived. One morning, I opened my front door to find a strange letter from Randy's lawyer. My stomach dropped. The letter demanded that I return all his personal items, his possessions, his car's title, everything I had taken from him. It also threatened legal action for tampering with his personal accounts. The audacity, it was almost laughable. But the truth was, I wasn't scared. I had done everything legally, and I had the evidence to prove it. Still, I knew this wasn't the last I'd hear from him. As I read the letter, I felt a cold sense of clarity wash over me. Randy had always been good at pulling people into his web of lies, and now he was trying to pull me back in, hoping that I'd be intimidated into doing what he wanted. I wasn't his pawn anymore. I had moved on. But there was one thing left to do: expose him for who he truly was. A week later, I received a call from Randy's mother. I hadn't spoken to her since the night I sent her the voice messages. She was calm, but I could sense the tension in her voice. She apologized for Randy's behavior, but this time there was something different. She said she was worried about him. He had become reclusive, barely leaving the house. She wanted to know if I'd speak to him, if I could try to fix things. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I couldn't bring myself to care. What was left to fix? Randy had made his choices, and they had consequences. He had burned every bridge with me. I told her that there was nothing left to say. I wished her the best, but hung up shortly after. I wasn't about to become another pawn in Randy's game. Things started spiraling for Randy. Without a job, without his car, and with his reputation in tatters, he had nowhere to go. His friends had turned their backs on him, realizing the truth of his manipulations. And yet, Randy continued to dig himself deeper. One day, I ran into Jake at the grocery store. He was still wearing the same smug expression, but this time there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. He tried to strike up conversation, but I wasn't having it. I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses. He looked at me with a strange mix of guilt and defiance. "Randy's a mess," he said quietly. "You're not going to let him just rot, are you?" I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Life continued. But Randy's story wasn't finished. A few weeks later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance who informed me that Randy had been in a car accident. It wasn't serious, but the incident sparked rumors. He had been drinking, and his insurance was null due to unpaid premiums. His parents had stopped supporting him, and now he was on his own, facing a future full of uncertainty. I thought I would feel something, maybe guilt, maybe relief, but I didn't. All I felt was a strange emptiness. Randy had made his choices, and he had to live with the consequences. I couldn't keep carrying him anymore. As time passed, I started to notice that Emma was becoming increasingly concerned. She could see the toll Randy's actions had taken on me, and she kept asking if I was okay. I assured her I was fine, but there were days when I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The emotional scars were still there, and sometimes I found myself questioning if I had done the right thing. One night, Emma pulled me aside and said, "You need to let it go. He's not worth this much of your energy." She was right. I couldn't keep living in the past. It was time to move forward. I started taking small steps toward healing. I focused on my career, my hobbies, and my friendships. The money I used to spend on Randy's bills was now going into a savings account for my future. I even started planning a trip for myself, something I had always wanted to do, but had put on hold for years. One morning, I walked into my apartment, and it felt like a new beginning. The weight of the past had finally started to lift, but there was still one thing I had to do. Find closure. Months passed. Randy's story became just another chapter in my life that I could finally put behind me. His name no longer caused a stir in my heart. Instead, I was embracing the freedom I had fought so hard for. I made new memories, met new people, and began to rediscover who I was. Then one day, I received an unexpected message on Instagram. It was from Randy's brother. I had no idea what to expect, but I opened it anyway. "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a long time. I just wanted to apologize for everything. Randy's been a mess. I should have told you the truth." For a moment, I hesitated. But then, I realized that this was a part of the past I didn't need to revisit. I politely thanked him for the message, but told him I had moved on. The next day, I signed a lease for a new apartment. It was smaller, cozier, but it felt like home. The peace I had been longing for was finally here. Randy was still out there, somewhere, trying to rebuild his life. But as for me, I was finally moving forward. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that no matter how much you love someone, you can't lose yourself in the process. I wasn't going to let anyone take my happiness away from me again. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The final message came weeks later. It was from Randy. He apologized for everything, saying he'd made mistakes and wanted to fix things. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling nothing but indifference. I had given him everything, my time, my money, my patience. But I was done. I deleted the message without responding. The past was over. Even though I had moved on from Randy and everything it put me through, there were days when I still found myself looking over my shoulder, wondering if he would try to make a reappearance. The past had a way of creeping in at the most unexpected times. A few weeks after a message from Randy's brother, I received a strange package at my door. It wasn't large, just a small envelope. At first, I thought it was just another unwanted piece of mail. But when I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of me at the restaurant on our anniversary night. It wasn't just a candid shot. It looked like someone had been watching me, possibly from a distance. The thought of Randy or someone connected to him, keeping tabs on me, sent a chill down my spine. The next day, as I was coming home from work, I noticed something odd. My door was slightly ajar. I froze in place, my heart pounding. Had I forgotten to lock it? Or had someone forced their way in? I crept inside, every step echoing in the silence. My living room was untouched, but something didn't feel right. My senses were heightened, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I quickly checked the rest of the apartment. My bedroom, the bathroom, the closets. Everything seemed fine, but the feeling of unease lingered. I took a deep breath, reassuring myself that I was just overreacting. Still, I made a mental note to change my locks again. This wasn't just paranoia. Something felt off. A few days later, my phone rang late at night. I looked at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. It was one of those calls where you immediately know something is wrong, but you're too scared to answer. I hesitated for a long moment before picking up. "Hello," I said, my voice shaky. The other end was silent for a few beats before a familiar voice spoke. "Randy's. You think it's over? You think you've won," he spat. My heart skipped. I had been hoping to never hear from him again. Yet here he was, calling me in the dead of night, his voice full of anger and bitterness. "I'm not finished with you. You can't do what you did and just get away with it." My mind raced. What did he mean by that? What was he planning? I tried to keep my composure. "Randy, I'm done. You've made your choice. There's nothing left to say." But he wouldn't let go. His voice dropped to a low, chilling tone. "You'll regret this. Everyone will know the truth." Before I could respond, he hung up. The next few days were eerily quiet again. I didn't hear from Randy, and everything seemed normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing behind the scenes. I turned to Emma for support. I needed someone who understood everything I had been through. Over coffee, I shared my worries about Randy and the photo, about the strange phone call. Emma listened intently, her face growing more concerned with every word I spoke. "You have to be careful. I'm not sure what he's planning, but it's clear he's not done with you," Emma said, her voice serious. "Whatever happens, I'll be here for you." I kept my guard up, unsure of what would happen next. But Randy's actions were growing more erratic. His online posts became more frequent and increasingly cryptic. He was spiraling, and the public facade he had built was starting to crack. Then, one day, I stumbled upon something unexpected. As I was scrolling through Instagram, I found a post from one of Randy's former co-workers, someone who had quit working with him months ago. The post was a screen capture of a text message conversation between Randy and a third-party contact, discussing illegal activities at work. It was clear now that Randy's behavior wasn't just about him being a bad partner. It was about a much darker side of him that I had never known. My stomach churned as I read through the messages. I felt both disgusted and oddly vindicated. The moment I discovered Randy's criminal activities, I knew everything had changed. I couldn't just move on. I had to protect myself. What if he came after me? What if the lies he had spread about me started to cause real damage? I reached out to a lawyer to see if there was anything I could do to protect myself. I wasn't about to let Randy get away with trying to ruin my life. As I explained my situation, I realized how far Randy had gone to manipulate and control everyone around him, including me. The lawyer advised me to keep a record of everything, from his calls to the photo to the strange incidents. It was time to take action before he could hurt anyone else. After weeks of staying silent, Randy made one last attempt to get back into my life. One evening, as I was out walking, I received an unexpected message from him. "Meet me. You owe me this." I hesitated, but I knew I needed to confront him. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I agreed to meet him at a public park. In the daylight, there was no way he could manipulate or intimidate me there. When I arrived, Randy was waiting under a large oak tree, his face unreadable. "You're really going to go through with this?" he asked bitterly. "You're really going to make me the bad guy?" I stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You've already made yourself the bad guy. The truth is out, Randy. You can't hide from it anymore." His eyes flickered with rage. But I didn't back down. The confrontation with Randy was intense, but ended in a way I had never imagined. After a few harsh words, Randy finally seemed to crumble. He admitted to everything, the manipulation, the lies, the cheating. But it wasn't a moment of redemption for him. It was just another desperate plea for me to forgive him. But I couldn't. I had already given him more than enough chances. As I walked away from that park, I realized that there was nothing more I could do for him. It was over, and I was finally free. The months that followed were a period of deep healing. I stayed away from anything that had to do with Randy, focusing instead on my own growth and well-being. I began therapy to work through the emotional scars he had left on me, and I focused on rebuilding my sense of self-worth. I took that solo trip to Portland, just as I had planned. It was terrifying at first, but the sense of freedom and empowerment I felt as I explored the city on my own was something I had never experienced before. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Time passed, and I settled into a routine that made me feel content and whole. I started dating again, slowly but surely, but I made sure that this time I wasn't settling for anything less than I deserved. And when I thought about Randy, it wasn't with anger or sadness anymore. It was with indifference. He had been a lesson, a painful one, but a lesson nonetheless. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I had learned from my time with Randy. I had been so desperate for love and validation that I had allowed myself to be taken advantage of. But I wasn't that person anymore. Forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about me. And as I let go of the resentment I had been holding on to for so long, I finally found peace. As I embraced the future, I realized that everything I had gone through had prepared me for something greater. My journey had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more confident. I was no longer afraid of the unknown. I was ready to face whatever came next with courage and grace. Randy's chapter was closed, but mine was just beginning. Months had passed, and I felt like I was finally in a place of peace. I had healed from everything Randy had put me through, and I was more focused than ever on my own growth. I had taken up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. It felt good to give back, to not be bound by the toxic memories of my past relationship. But as life went on, I found myself questioning if I was truly ready to move on. Had I fully healed? Was I truly free of the shackles that Randy had bound me with? Or was I just running away from confronting the deeper scars he had left behind? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer living in the shadow of my past. One evening, at a mutual friends gathering, I met someone who caught my attention. His name was Leo, and he was nothing like Randy. He was kind, thoughtful, and had an easy confidence that drew people to him. We exchanged a few words that night, and though I was hesitant, I found myself intrigued. Over the next few weeks, we bumped into each other a couple more times. He was funny, understanding, and genuinely kind. But I couldn't help but keep my guard up. I had been through so much, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes again. I didn't want to be vulnerable, only to be hurt once more. But Leo was different. He wasn't trying to rush anything, and he understood my need for time. Slowly, I started to open up cautiously but surely. Still, deep inside, I feared that I might never be able to truly trust anyone again. Emma had been my rock throughout everything. She had watched me suffer, and she had been there through every tear, every breakdown, every victory. I could never thank her enough. One day, she took me out for a spa day, insisting that I needed a break from all the chaos. While we were getting massages, she told me something that stuck with me. You can't keep living in the shadow of someone else's mistakes. Randy doesn't deserve your thoughts, your energy, or your time. You're so much more than that. Her words resonated deep within me. I realized she was right. I had spent far too long letting Randy's actions define me. It was time to define myself. I had been avoiding it for so long, but it was time to face it head on. I contacted Randy's parents, not to reconcile, not to apologize, but to tell them what I had been through. I wanted them to know how their son had treated me, how he had humiliated me, how he had manipulated everyone around him, including me. I wasn't expecting them to fix everything or even apologize, but what I did get was an unexpected level of support from his mother. She admitted to me that she had been blind to Randy's behavior for too long and that she was ashamed of how things had turned out. It wasn't closure, but it was a step forward. As I continued to spend time with Leo, I realized something important. Trust didn't happen overnight. It wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. I had to rebuild it from the ground up, not just with others, but with myself. Leo never pushed me. He respected my space, my boundaries, and my pace. That kind of patience was something I hadn't experienced in a long time. And gradually, I began to trust again, but this time, I was doing it on my own terms. I wasn't perfect. I still had my moments of doubt, my fears. But with Leo, I felt safe, and that was a feeling I had forgotten. One evening, as Leo and I sat on the couch watching a movie, I felt an overwhelming sense of fear. Not fear of losing him, but fear of letting go of the past. Letting go of the years I had spent with Randy, all the energy I had poured into that broken relationship. It was a fear of moving on completely, of closing that door forever. Leo must have sensed it. He looked at me and said, "I'm not asking you to forget your past. I'm asking you to let me be a part of your future." That was the moment I knew that it was time. It was time to let go, to stop living the past and embrace the future, whatever it might hold. I started focusing more on the things that brought me joy. My career, my passions, and my new relationship. I wasn't perfect, but I was learning to be kinder to myself. I spent time exploring new interests like photography, which had always intrigued me, but I'd never had the time to pursue. I realized that life was about balance, about finding the things that made me happy and carving out space for them, no matter how small they seemed. I wasn't living for anyone else anymore. I was living for me. As I became more comfortable in my own skin, I noticed a shift in the way people responded to me. I was no longer the doormat I had been in the past. I was no longer apologizing for who I was or shrinking myself to fit someone else's mold. At work, I began to take on more challenging projects, pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I applied for leadership roles, not because I needed validation, but because I believed in my abilities. And to my surprise, I got the promotion I had been eyeing for months. Leo and I's relationship continued to grow. We began talking about bigger things, about traveling, about the future, about the possibility of living together someday. I still kept a small part of myself reserved, just in case. But I knew that I wasn't afraid of love anymore. I wasn't afraid of vulnerability. One weekend, we took a trip together to the mountains, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The day came when I realized I no longer carried the baggage of the past. Randy's influence, his cruelty, his manipulation, none of it had any hold over me anymore. I had let it go. I had become a stronger, more confident version of myself. And as I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. I had finally broken free. The final chapter of my past had closed. But my future, it was just beginning. I had everything I needed. My career was flourishing. My relationship with Leo was grounded in trust and respect, and I had found peace within myself. I was no longer bound by the mistakes of the past, nor was I afraid of what the future might hold. Life had thrown its challenges at me, but I had overcome them, and now I was free to live my life on my own terms, without fear, without regret. This was my story, and the best part? It was just getting started.